West Virginia, home to winding country roads, the Blue Ridge Mountains, and the Shenandoah River. Life is old there, but how old? When did West Virginia become a state, and why? Today's video will explain how the mountain state came to be. Virginia was the first successful colony established by Europeans in the future United States. Previous attempts like Roanoke in the Carolinas had failed, but in 1607, the English finally managed to get a colony up and running. They named it in honor of the Virgin Queen Elizabeth I, who died only a few years before. In theory, it could claim land stretching all the way to the other end of the continent, but it would never make it anywhere near the Pacific. After 1624, it was declared a crown colony and was considered the most loyal of all of Britain's American colonies. That didn't stop it declaring independence in 1775, making the Commonwealth of Virginia one of the 13 founding colonies of the United States. In time, though, one Virginia would become two, and the lines of that split were already being drawn. Really, they'd been drawn as soon as the settlers started moving inland back in the early 17th century. The area of the modern state of Virginia was low-lying and flat. It was good for both agriculture and large-scale human settlement. Most of the colony's larger cities like Richmond and Norfolk emerged there, as did the colony's larger industries. Large-scale agriculture, especially of cotton and tobacco, meant a plantation economy too. That meant slavery, which dominated Virginia's economy. The state government was there. Most of the trade occurred along the coast, and the population was concentrated there. West Virginia, meanwhile, was mountainous and difficult. It had far fewer settlements and few cities into the modern era. The settlers there built rural communities and small farm holdings that they mostly worked themselves. While slavery existed there, it was limited. The mountainous terrain meant that large-scale livestock rearing was a better use of land than farming in many cases, which led to a different society and economy. As the colony developed in the following 2 centuries, the two Virginias were already forming. Low-lying Virginia was wealthier and controlled by the slave-owning elite, who wielded government power to protect their own interests and reinvest in their communities. Meanwhile, West Virginia was neglected. Very little money went to developing its infrastructure, so it remained a poorly governed frontier. This had its own allure for those who resented state control. The frontier spirit was alive and well among the settlers of West Virginia, who preferred the independence available in the mountains than the more controlled but stable colonial life in the lowlands. Already, by the 19th century, talk of secession started. West Virginia was sharply different in culture, society, and economy, was neglected by the state government, and was cut off by difficult mountain terrain. Physically, they were closer to Philadelphia than they were to Richmond, and didn't see why they should be governed by people who were so different and so far away. The same logic that had bought the U.S. its independence seemed to urge West Virginia's as well. Anyone who had studied U.S. history in this period won't be surprised to know that the final straw that forced the issue was slavery. By the 1850s, as tensions over slavery rose across the U.S., it was obvious that Virginia and West Virginia disagreed on it. West Virginia had become an abolitionist hotspot, with their limited slaveholding elite drowned out by the massively anti-slavery population. Meanwhile, the slaveholders kept their iron grip on power down in Richmond and enjoyed the support of the urban elite. In October 1859, these differences broke out into the open when the abolitionist preacher John Brown launched a raid on the government arsenal at Harper's Ferry in West Virginia. Brown wanted to seize weapons to arm slaves across Virginia, which he hoped might inspire a wider slave revolt across the United States. It was a naive plan. Brown's brave band of followers were quickly defeated by government forces, and Brown was captured. But the entire event was a chilling foreshadowing of the Civil War to come. Future Confederate General Robert E. Lee commanded the force that put down Brown's raid. Another future Confederate General, Stonewall Jackson, was assigned to guard Brown in prison. Meanwhile, John Wilkes Booth, the man who would assassinate Lincoln, was there to witness Brown's execution on charges of rebellion. Brown's raid demanded and divided the nation's opinion. West Virginians, like the other abolitionist states, admired him. The slaveholding states despised him. Historians often cite Brown's raid as the final breaking point before Civil War, and the final event that made union between Virginia and West Virginia impossible. With the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, the Civil War was a foregone conclusion. The slave states declared their formal secession from the Union to form the Confederacy, including Virginia. Weeks later, representatives from the future state of West Virginia gathered at the town of Wheeling to declare their rejection of the Virginia government's actions. Some delegates pressed for a full declaration of statehood, but others urged caution. The secession proposal still had to be approved by a referendum, and it was still possible that the people of Virginia would reject it. Of course, they were disappointed, and on May 23, 1861, Virginia voters ratified the secession by an overwhelming majority. 2 weeks later, the Wheeling Convention met again and declared the government in Richmond to be illegitimate and declared their own government, loyal to the United States. Francis Pierpont was nominated as the first governor of this new state, which they initially named Kanawha, after the river, but then changed to West Virginia. A constitutional referendum was held in the counties of this new West Virginia. Support was overwhelmingly in favor of the new state, but not without controversy. The Union soldiers closely watched polling stations and were accused of intimidating voters who would otherwise vote against the new state. Many opponents boycotted the vote in protest or out of fear. In the end, the results came out almost 95% in favor of seceding from Virginia. West Virginia was set about drawing up its state constitution. Now, West Virginia still had a number of slave owners, and the new government didn't want to make them any angrier than they already had. They agreed for a gradual emancipation to allow slave owners to transition to free labor. This wasn't going to fly with President Lincoln. Lincoln demanded that West Virginia abolish slavery immediately. If it did so, he would approve their admission. They debated it, but ultimately agreed. On June 20th, 1863, West Virginia became the 35th state in the Union and fully abolished slavery in its borders. This caused quite a bit of debate. The Union's opposition to the Confederacy rested on the idea that secession was illegal under U.S. law. However, Washington was perfectly happy to give their stamp of approval to West Virginia's secession from Virginia. This issue did not go unnoticed. Lincoln decided that the pressure of war made it acceptable, even if it wasn't strictly legal. But he also noted that, quote, "There is still a difference between secession against the Constitution and secession in favor of the Constitution." Despite all the effort to establish their own state, there was still talk in West Virginia of reunifying the rest of Virginia if the Union won out. Governor Pierpont disagreed, pointing out that natural, cultural, social, and economic barriers separated the states too much. The truth was that they'd never been very connected at all. The Virginia government had refused to invest in roads or railroads that would connect the state physically, and most of West Virginia's trade was with the other states. On top of everything else, why would they want to reunify at all? Pierpont was proven right. The differences were too stark, and the resentment after the war didn't encourage reconciliation either. Virginia's state government was reinstated with the end of the war in 1865. They did propose reunification in 1866, but were firmly turned down. Annoyed, Virginia tried one last gamble to claw back at least a few counties that had voters that had voted to leave. Virginia argued that voter intimidation had skewed the secession vote, and that the process of adding Jefferson and Berkeley counties to the new state had not finished until after the war was over, and the Virginia government had been reinstated. Therefore, they were legitimately part of Virginia, and should not have been handed over to West Virginia. In 1871, the case made it all the way to the Supreme Court in the creatively named Virginia versus West Virginia. After weighing the arguments, the Supreme Court came down hard on the side of West Virginia. They ruled that Virginia had relinquished all legitimate claims on territory when it rebelled, and they had zero grounds to challenge it. And with that, both Virginias were settled into the forms we know them today. The intense divisions of the past are long gone, but the echoes of what split the states apart are still there. Virginia remains more urbanized and wealthy, while West Virginia's rugged and rural landscape gives the mountain state its own unique identity. Even the politics carry signs of the past, with West Virginia still the deep, reliable red of Lincoln's party, while the Democrats can still count on Virginia's support.